Hey, what's up, everyone? Welcome back to episode 9 of Maker's Viewpoint from the Wood Brew channel. And I'm joined as always by Chris from Toolify.
Hey, everybody.
And Justin from You Can Make That.
Hey, guys.
All right, so today we've got a pretty heavy topic, I think. It's going to be very interesting, but first, I think we're just going to go around and say what we've been up to. So, Chris, what have you been doing?
Well, the last week I've been setting up some video stuff in my workshop, like video assistance stuff. So lighting, I should just say lighting. I got these diffusers for my lights because my workshop is these pot lights. It's in a basement with pot lights, and it creates very harsh, hard light. So I got these circles. It's like a 3-foot or so diffuser, round diffusers, and I hung them below the lights a few inches, and it produces much nicer light, at least I think. So that is my first attempt to do some lighting improvements in the workshop for the purpose of video making. Yeah, I think it'll work out. Otherwise, I really struggle with shadows and when I'm showing something with my hands, it ends up producing 4 different shadows from the 4 point sources, and it's really annoying. I hope this will help make it a bit nicer to look at and stuff like that. Project-wise, right now I am brainstorming, not really building anything, but brainstorming for a homemade oscillating spindle sander. It's probably gonna take me a while to get that ready, but that's what I'm working on. Justin, what about yourself?
I haven't been working on anything lately. I've been cleaning the garage. Last weekend I got back from Vegas for having my internship with Cirque du Soleil, or the elite training. Sorry, it's not the internship, which was really, really cool. It was really fun. We worked on a bunch of rigging and testing loads on wire ropes and doing center of gravity for mass for pinpoints. And we also got to see a bunch of the shows and go behind the scenes and see all the lighting and the sound. It was really fun. It was really fun. But most of the times I was just working on wire rope installations and rigging and just cable management, all that stuff. Learning, like I said, special geometry for figuring out the center mass and how long of cables you need to have to be able to carry this mass equally and all that stuff. So it's basically what I worked on. Dylan, what about you?
That sounds like a really,
it was really
awesome opportunity.
It was really fun. A lot of it's confidentiality stuff, which I didn't realize when I signed it and I was going back and reading what it was. But yeah, it was genius how they taught it, and they managed to cram everything in basically 3 days, which was awesome. And walking out of those 3 days, I feel like I learned more than I did in a full semester at school for physics and geometry wise. But yeah, no, it was really, really cool.
I'm sure that'll be a huge help and a jump forward in you getting to where you want to be too. I'm sure that a little bit of getting your foot in the door and everything.
It definitely helps on your resume and stuff like that. And I met up with one of the technical directors who I've met before, who basically told me about this whole experience. And I got talking with him, and he was, again, great guy, and told me to keep in touch with him. So it was really cool. It was really, really wild. There's 2 shows there that I think were, one of them is Ka, right? I've talked about this. It's the most technically advanced show in North America. And then they have Beatles Love, which was really cool. Beatles Love was basically, they took all Beatles songs, the band, and then just recombined them and added acrobatics and stuff. But they told the whole story of how the Beatles began and what happens, and how at one point I think John Lennon's mom died and all that stuff. It was ridiculous how they did it, and they incorporated all the pixels and stuff that I use on my house. So on the behind the scenes tour, we were walking above the whole stage and everything in the catwalks, and you just saw these strips of pixels just hanging up there, and apparently they all fly down and they completely light up all the stage. So at one point of the song, it's entirely dark, and it looks like one pinpoint of light is spiraling up around the entire arena, going up and you realize it's just them turning the pixels on all across the room at one point, slowly making it go upwards. It was really, really, really cool. Yeah, Ka was definitely amazing. With the animatronics and stuff that they'd use in the stage elements, it was ridiculous. From a tech side, it was absolutely amazing. Yeah, that was basically it. Oh, and then I made it back for Maker Faire on Sunday, which was really cool. I got to meet up with quite a few people. I met up with Izzy Swan, which was fun. Lutz, William Lutz again, and then a bunch of other people like Justin from Make Build Modify. I'm gonna leave people out because I feel bad, and I'm gonna completely forget some of the people. Everyone who I met up with there, thank you. It was really fun. You guys made my time really enjoy. Oh, Chad from Handcrafting, I met up with him. Anthony, Russian Woodwork, a bunch of people. It was really fun. It was really, really fun. And then we ended the day that same day. No, the next day. Dylan, I finally got to meet up with you in person, which was really fun. We met up with Laura Kampf, which was ridiculous. That was really cool. And yeah, like you said, your video you posted, it was a really fun conversation. It definitely was. It was fun being able to sit around and just have a totally chill conversation in a coffee shop. It was really fun. Dylan, tell us about your experience.
Yeah, so since last time we talked, I have posted the fidget spinner video that I was debating on posting. Well, there's a lot of mixed feelings about it, I think. Like some people were either like totally for it and loved every single thing about it. There were some people in the middle who video thought it was slightly over the top but still enjoyed it, and then there was some people who thought it was the worst thing they've ever seen in their life. So I guess that's usually how it goes, but I think the overall feel I got from it was good, and that people really enjoyed the style. I enjoyed fun to like actually be able to express some emotions in the video because it's woodworking. There's not that much you can do unless you make it funny or fun or whatever, you know. So yeah, I think it was a success. It's doing really well. So when we were on our trip, I looked at my phone. It had like 2,500 views in the last like 60 minutes or something crazy. I think it's like about 70,000 now. It's sort of slowing down, but really good. A lot of people I think liked it, so I think it was a good idea. I guess it worked out.
Yeah.
But anyway, so Molly, my good friend Luke, I'm sure you've heard of him. If you haven't seen him, definitely you should get on Instagram and watch my stories because he's kind of like the star of the Instagram stories. Kind of makes him funny. He's been one of my friends since early in my childhood, and we actually, all three of us, went on the trip of a lifetime. So we went to California. The initial, I'm gonna go ahead and go into the topic. I'm just gonna be pretty much telling my California trip story. It really turned into something pretty epic. Originally went to California to go to the Makers Faire, and we had like a really strict itinerary due to budget reasons, obviously, and just time constraints and stuff like that. And we really didn't think we were going to be able to do that much stuff other than go to the Makers Faire. That's the whole reason we went out there. Makers Faire. We were looking forward. We were looking. I can't say this. We were looking forward to it so much, but had, if not a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, very high up the list, more or less a bucket list opportunity. Wait many years to do, and we took that opportunity. And before I even go into this, I want to take a brief second to actually say, I might say a few times, but this is one of the main times that I've actually gotten to fully do what it is that I preach. It's like taking opportunities, taking every single opportunity that comes by, because if you don't, you're not going to know what that could have gotten you, where it could have gotten you, the impact it could have made on you. If you don't take opportunities, or you're afraid of the risk or failure, or if you're afraid of things that may come up in the future, then you're never going to actually be able to see the full potential and be able to see the big happy ending, or whatever you want to call it, the full potential of the opportunity. So that is what this whole sort of experience was, and it was purely life-changing. It was unbelievable. It was a hectic trip full of a ridiculous amount of driving. We drove over 2,300 miles in 7 days. I think Molly driving for like 60 hours. We had to rent a car, obviously, because we flew over there. And because we're all under 21, rented the car under her name, and she was the only person allowed to drive it. Big shout out to her for driving 2,300 miles and not really complaining about it one bit. So yeah, I'm gonna get into it. I do have a video about this, about the trip in general. So I'll leave a link to it in the show notes if you want to go watch it. But I'm gonna go over briefly the entire trip quickly before I get into this crazy opportunity and crazy thing that we ended up doing. So what we were actually supposed to do is we were supposed to fly into San Francisco, rent a car, drive to Monterey, which is like 2.5 hours, stay in Monterey for a little while, like a couple days, 2 days, and kind of explore the local area. Then drive to San Mateo and go to Maker's Fair. That was go to the Maker's Fair, explore San Francisco the day after, and come home. What we were going to be able to do during that time. In reality, we had the complete opposite trip. So, video to watch the step-by-step days stuff, but I'm going to jump all the way into, I believe it's day 6. Day that Luke and I climbed Mount Whitney. And if you don't know what Mount Whitney is the highest peak in the continental United States. So it's 14,505 feet tall, and it is the tallest mountain, like I said, in the continental United States. And that, but now that you know what Whitney actually is, it's a mountain, and it's a really, really big mountain. I'm going to rewind it from day 6, day 4. So day 4, we've already veered way off our planned itinerary. This is the 19th, the day before Maker Faire starts. We decided to head to Sequoia National Park. We wanted to see the giant redwoods and go see all that. We ended up seeing the largest tree on planet Earth is there, which is really insane. But while we're driving to Sequoia National Park, Luke and I look up, what are the things that we need to see? What are the things that we want to see the most while we're there? And the number one thing that kind of popped up was Mount Whitney peak in the U.S. It's kind of actually outside of Sequoia National Park, but it's right behind it. And so we start looking into this, and we're like, wow, across the highest mountain here. I wonder if it's possible to hike it. I wonder if it's possible to climb it. So we start looking it up, and everything we're seeing from the surface is it's this really enjoyable, easy, well, not easy, but good shape, fairly easy hike to the top. And so we're like, okay, we really want to do this. Let's make this happen. Let's figure out whatever it is we need to do to make this happen, because cool. And what we thought was that we would be able to do it that day, that we would be able to do it the 19th and then go to the Maker's Faire the following day. Well, neither of us have done much mountain climbing, obviously, and we didn't really know what all to do. So we start looking into it, and we find out that you need a permit to climb this mountain. And the permit is on a lottery-based system. So you have to apply for it like a year in advance. And if you're lucky people to get one, then you get the opportunity to actually climb it. And people, as we start talking to local rangers and stuff, people wait years to get one of these permits. Literally, some people have waited a lifetime to try to climb the mountain. And we happen to be...
So can I ask, how did you... I want to know how you managed to get that. That sounds awesome.
That's what I'm getting into.
Okay.
We looked at this, and immediately after seeing that, our hopes dropped. We're like, oh, okay, well, idea. Guess we're not going to be able to do it. And I'm like, well, let me at least look on their website real quick where you reserve, and just let me just see what. I mean, this seems crazy. Why would they make it so difficult? Well, I pulled up the reservation booklet thing, and every single day is reserved. Sunday has one permit available. Someone canceled their permit, obviously within maybe an hour. Looked on the website, and it was one slot available. I took it immediately without even thinking. I just bought it, like 40. I think it was like $40, so it wasn't that bad. And I was like, should we buy it? Should we buy it? We're sitting there like, oh my gosh, without even like doing our full amount of research that we should have done first. And we're just like, I get it. So let's buy it. And we bought it. And at that point, we sort of like enter national park. We're pulling in. And we're driving up the mountain, and there's this lookout point that you finally get to. And we stop. And we get out of the car. Really, really far in the distance are these big snow-covered peaks. And it's one of the craziest, most beautiful sights I've ever seen. My gosh, that's Mount Whitney. We have to do this. Come to find out from reading the little plaque, that mountain was only 10,000 feet tall. The mountain we were going to do was 14,500 feet tall.
You say it so casually, like only.
That was a shell shocker for sure. That was one of the first ones. And Molly's, of course, like freaking out. Like, what are you guys thinking? This is crazy. Like, are you serious? Are you really going to do this? And we just dove into the internet and tried to figure out as much as we possibly could that day. Like, we're walking through the woods looking at these trees, but like we're on our phones, and like getting so enthralled by it that we just canceled our Airbnb in San Mateo, and we're like, if we go back to San Mateo, we'll figure it out. But for now, we're getting there. So that was the first major loss of money, which is one of many that's going to occur here. Was not able to get for the San Mateo Airbnb. And we get a hotel, and we're going online, and we find out that that permit was available was that the mountain is currently covered in snow still, which means it's extremely dangerous and makes it 3 or 4 times harder than when it's not covered in snow. From being in good shape and properly training and being pretty easily doable goes to you're going to need crampons, winter gear, all of this extra stuff that we knew nothing really about to get up the mountain. Not to mention, it makes it twice as difficult because half the trail and is nearly impossible to follow, and half the trail is covered and you can't even use it, so you have to make your own way. And our hearts sank. Like, in that moment, we were like, what have we gotten ourselves into? And we're kind of sitting there, and we're like, well, go. We've done all of this. You know, we have this chance to at least get up the mountain a little ways, maybe, and experience it, because we don't know when we're ever going to get this chance again. So we go to a climbing store, REI, and we load up on gear. And while we're there, we're talking to a person who, the first person we get is this woman, and she's never, but she's making it sound like we're for sure going to die if we try, and that we should probably buy half the store. And Luke is still pretty calm at this point, I think, but I'm starting to freak out a little bit because pretty experienced and does this day to day and is looking at us like we're crazy, and she's saying that she's never even done it.
I was gonna say, yeah, that doesn't really sound too reassuring.
No. Us to a younger guy, Michael, who worked there, and he had done it. So she's like, go talk to him. Well, we get up to him. He looks at us and he's like, nah, y'all got it. No problem. It's going to be super easy. It's going to be a cakewalk. Y'all got it. It's going to, here, you are going to need some spikes and crampons for your shoes. We actually use some smaller versions. They're called micro spikes. But you're going to need some waterproof boots. You're going to need the whole list of stuff we brought real quick. Actually, I'm not going to because it's going to move. I've babbled on too much. I'm going to make a link so you can download the itinerary, the climbing list, and everything we had to get for it. And you can follow along if you want to and look at all this stuff. But anyway, we're talking to him. He makes it seem like a cakewalk. So we're like, oh, okay, we're good now. We feel better about this. Well, I'm not 100% sure that he realized up there, or if he realized that there was snow up there at the time. When we got back to the hotel, I called the ranger station, and the lady basically was like, a handful of people in the last 3 weeks who've made it to the top, and nobody else has been making it. And the failure rate's like 70% or something crazy. Experienced people who've been like maybe possibly training, maybe not, but at least waiting and planning for over a year to climb this. Some like kids from Alabama who've never been above like 6,000 feet before and have zero experience climbing and prepare. I think this was like the third or fourth time we highly reconsidered ourselves of doing this. Nevertheless, as possibly young, foolish young individuals, we decided we're still going to go for it. He pass us up. We're going to go for it. Molly's pretty afraid at this point. This is the night before we plan on doing it, and pretty much freaking out at this point because we read on an article that night that I think it was a couple days prior or a week prior, someone was airlifted off the top, and another one had unfortunately died the week before. And so, yeah, it got real serious real fast. I'll just leave it at that. I'm trying to make it like kind of funny and laughable here, and not super serious, but both like really actually genuinely terrified and didn't want to admit it. But we went to camp. We got there at around 7 p.m. This is right at the base of the mountain. It's called Whitney Portal. And this is around 8,000 feet is camp. And what you should do is you should I cannot say this, your body to that altitude by spending a full night there, kind of like resting up the next day before you leave the following day. We didn't have time to do this. Our permit was for the next day. We just couldn't do it. So there was no way we could do that for ourselves. And in fact, most people who climb this do it in several days. They just slowly work up and camp their way up the mountain. We also didn't have this option, and we had a day permit, so we had to climb the entire mountain up and down in one day. So to give you a little bit of statistics about the mountain before we jump into the actual climb. The mountain is, like I said before, 14,505 feet. We're starting at 8,000 feet. The hike to the summit is roughly 11 miles during the summer. That's when the trail is completely open. I would say it's probably closer to 15 in the winter, or when there's snow everywhere, because you can't exactly go the same way. Where we were at 7 p.m., sun's going down. Luke and I huddle up behind literally a rock, a boulder ground, because we did not have a tent. Molly left to go back to the hotel. She left us there. And we're sitting there and to death, because between like 7 p.m. and 10 p.m., I think the temperature went from probably like low 70s to like, it seemed like it did at least.
While you're freezing your butt off, Molly's just chilling, like at the hotel.
she got that was part of the deal. Hampton for her to stay at while we did this, because she was gonna have to spend the whole day like
Poolside.
doing nothing basically.
Yeah.
I think she secretly enjoyed it a lot. But she dropped us off, and that's for me. That was the first time the trip when she actually left and night fell, and we're sitting there huddled up behind a rock. That I was like, what the hell did we just do? Because where we're at, we had one bar of self-service. As soon as we made it up the mountain, just ever so slightly, 0 bars of service. We're stuck, more or less. There is no coming. There is no really getting on or anything like that. Luckily, we had some emergency blankets that we happened to purchase just because we thought we might need them. A mountain, that didn't happen. We needed it well before the mountain. We ended up taking those out that night. And we froze to death until about 11:30 p.m. when we decided we could not handle it anymore. And we got up to leave. We were going to start the hike at 11:30. Initially, we thought we were going to sleep a little bit and then start the hike at 2 a.m. We started at 11:30 p.m. And what that means is that obviously it's pitch black. So we had our headlamps on and we got started. The first at 11:50, I'm reading directly off this itinerary that I wrote down. At 11:50, at 500 feet of elevation higher than when we started. This is basically just a dirt path, very simple to walk up so far. At 11:50, we crossed our first little creek, and nothing bad about it. There was a lot of water, but it was very short, like 6 feet wide maybe, and we were able to skip across that, no problem. At 12:10 p.m., this is at 9,000 feet of elevation, we crossed the second creek, and this was the first of many very sketchy moments on this trip. Water, because the snow was melting, the water was flowing extremely fast, and the creek crossing here was about 15 feet wide. Just see what our headlamps could see, but off to our left was pretty much a waterfall or a ravine. So if you slipped, would not have been a good thing. We just took it very, very slowly and used our trekking poles to sort of balance ourselves and get across that. I had a little bit of GoPro footage of that, and that was the first real sketchy part.
So wait, before you go on, you said you got some GoPro footage. Did you film the entire climb all the way up?
My intentions were, but my brain for most of the climb after this point was literally on my 2 feet. Had to be. I did not even think or remember that I had a camera on me until like.
I guess that's better than you had to stay focused.
Yeah. I mean, honestly, I wish I had, because it was a chest mount, so I could have clicked it at any time. But I never even thought about it, and so some of the sketchier parts I don't even have on film. I just was like, we're doing this like 1 foot at a time, do not slip sort of thing. So we're at like 9,500 feet. We're at 9,000 feet. It's 12:10 p.m. creek. And just a little bit up the way from that was the first bit of snow we saw, which was a big shocker because we did not expect to see snow so early. The reportings were probably, what we were seeing was probably worse than what was reported, meaning there was more snow on the mountain still, that it was starting way lower than what we expected. We expected to see it around 10,000 feet, and we were seeing it at 9,000, which was scary. Then at 1 a.m., everything was snow. There was no more patchy spots. It was full-fledged snow, maybe a foot of snow at least. And this is when we came to a spot where Luke and I considered turning around for the first time. The trail had been washed away by just a big plow of snow, probably an avalanche, I would assume. And there was about a 70-yard traverse that we had to do. And traverse meaning ways to go across the mountain, not up, across. And this was basically just a solid sheet of snow and ice that was yards wide, 50 to 70 yards wide, and probably like a 45 to 50 degree angle. So pretty darn steep. And when we would shine, or I have a little bit of footage of this actually, when we would shine our headlamps down the slope, we couldn't see the end. Looking at each other like, what have we gotten ourselves into? This is way more than we bargained for. And
so have you ever trained to do something like what you're describing now, or no? Like just do it?
I've never even been in snow. I've never even been in snow.
I guess that would be a good way on starting to be in snow, though. So now, like, when you go up to the mountains, you're just like,
easy. Like, major snow was on this first sketchiest thing I've ever done in my life situation.
Holy cow.
We pulled out our ice axes. Is literally just like a hatchet, more or less, but it has a real long top on it. It's what you use to kind of catch yourself if you need to. And pulled out our ice axes. And what we literally did for like 50 yards was we'd shove the ice axe in the snow above us and hold on to it. We had like leashes on there so we could, if we fell, we'd still get caught. We'd shove it in. We'd make like one footing. We'd have to like kick the footing hold out so that you could put your foot down. Pretty much lay down, pick up the ice axe, stab it back in the snow like a foot further, inched along this traverse for what seemed like forever. And we got to the other side of it, and it was like sketchy sort of drop-off thing. We had to climb up. But honestly, like at the beginning of it, we looked at each other, and like I said, we're like, this is way too, not even up the mountain yet, and we're doing things that we've never encountered and didn't expect to encounter. But by the end of those 50 yards, a ridiculous amount of confidence. I felt almost like ready to find the next one. Like I was super hyped up about it, as weird as that sounds. But like it was a huge adrenaline rush that was really pretty fun. And once you kind of figured out how to use the axe, and once you kind of figured out how to kick your steps in and stuff, it really wasn't that sketchy. Like looking at it from an outsider who's never done it, it was like you're asking to die. But once you kind of got halfway through it and were doing it, it wasn't near as scary as I thought it would be. And it was actually like a lot of fun, as crazy as that may sound. Doing a pretty good job. I want to keep tabs. I'm doing a pretty good job of like making sure the stuff is not just one big giant.
I think it's a really good story. I want to hear it.
I was just saying,
okay. I just want to make sure that I'm not like jumping over.
You know,
all right, so we get through this.
Yeah.
And this is, if you're looking at a map of the actual trail, and I guess I'll leave a link to where you can look at one of those. We are right, well, let me look here. Make sure I get this right. We're basically right at the crossing on the map of the river. You're just going to see a black line cross a blue mark. We're basically right past that at this point, and we've barely even made a dent in the hike so far. And at this point, basically zero trail. There are 1,000 boot tracks, it seems like, going every single way, both up and down, and they're just going in all different directions. And I actually spoke to a ranger, and she warned me about this, of people getting up there and having no idea where they're at or where they're going, and they're just walking all around the place. And so you can't find the trail. And then when you try to follow foot tracks, you may be following some doofus who has no idea what he's doing. And we start trying to go the way we think we need to go, but it's still pitch black. So reference points are useless. We don't really know exactly. And when we start walking up like the heaviest footpath in the snow, well, we get lost. Like literally it looks like a herd of animals walk through here. Ends at basically the river, which is where we should be crossing, but it was an impossible crossing. There was no way you could cross the river again. This would be the last crossing where these tracks came to, and they looked like they just pretty much vanished into thin air. And we sat up there in that time. We sat up there for 2 hours, whilst walking in circles. We'd come all the way back to the traversing point that we were at, try to go different footpaths, and could not figure it out. He starts feeling sick at this point, and he's starting to get what's called altitude sickness. Altitude sickness is what happens when your body can't produce enough red blood cells and enough oxygen to supply your body. This tends to happen as you go higher in altitude because the air becomes much thinner. And he starts having symptoms of this yet, but he's starting to feel sick. And we're sitting there, and he sort of looks at me like, well, is that it? Do we need to call it here? We don't really know where to go. And I sort of looked at him, I'm like, well, let's just go up and down the river until we find where it is people are crossing. Up and down and couldn't find anything. And out of the corner of my eye, I saw another headlamp coming up the trail. This is really far down it. I'm like, okay, good, there's more people coming up. Let's wait on them and see if they know where to go. Later, this is at 3 a.m., where it's a little over 10,000 feet of elevation. We meet these two guys, two really young guys, one of which had already summited Whitney before. We're like, wow, these guys know exactly where to go. Well, they just take off, like running up the mountain. It's insane. And we're just doing everything we can to keep up with them and kind of just trusting that they know where they're going. The top of the actual river, and we had never even seen this point yet. I don't know how we didn't find this, but we got to the top with them, and we had to cross basically the top of a waterfall. We had to jump off of sort of like a boulder down to a filled area, and this was basically like a foot away from where all this water was coming out of the mountain. Because see, what happens is that as these waterfalls and trails get covered in snow, what you have is a giant overhanging sheet of snow and then a giant river running under it, and then wherever it powers its way out, you can see it. And this was basically that. It was the top of like a waterfall, more or less. And we get down on this ledge that's probably no more than 16 inches wide, and we're just sort of like inching our way around the top. There's a giant like cliff boulder on our right hand side, and then to our left is like trying to exaggerate this, but literally to our left is death. Freezing water and a 20 or 30 foot fall into rocks. And at this point, honestly, and probably from this point on, the fear pretty much completely left my body. I was in such like a hyper-focused. It was literally all about each single footstep. It was about putting one foot in front of the other and watching where that foot was placed. And before I ever even put weight on it, wiggling it around a bit, making sure that where I was stepping, even though it looked solid, was solid. Whole trip. But in that moment, the fear sort of just fell away. I've done a lot of action sports in my life, and I've always been near this sort of day, and I kind of enjoy it. But this was the new ultimate I think that in that moment was the new highest fear level I've ever had in my life, and somehow I'd overcome it. And I think it was just purely about the fact that I had something to focus on, which was my feet, just one foot in front of the other. So we inch our way around the top of this and get through that no problem. It goes down or anything. Well, immediately following that waterfall crossing, we came, which is right below Outpost Camp on the map. And Outpost Camp, I believe, is technically speaking where the literal waterfall comes from. And the guys were like, okay, it's time to put our spikes on. We got to do some actual climbing. So we sat down, we put our spikes on there. And I look over, and Luke is throwing up, knees and throwing up and looking terrible. And that very instant was, I mean, it was pure fear for me. I had done a lot of research the night before on like what altitude sickness was. And the major symptoms of like, holy crap, needs to be addressed right now is throwing up. Those include like headaches, dizziness, and being nauseous. And then if you're throwing up, like no questions asked, you have altitude sickness. And so all of us were just like, Luke, are you okay? Are you okay? Like, do we need to go down right now? And he sort of like kind of was on the edge of like, yes, no, maybe. And we're sort of like, he sort of sat down for a second and felt better. And your body can do that. It depends on what altitude you're at, but your body actually can recover it depending on what altitude you are at. If you're at a much higher altitude than say where we were at, which was like 10,000 feet, your body's going to have a ridiculously hard time recovering. I don't think we were to the full danger point yet, but we were getting very, very close. We decided that he was going to continue. So the first very strenuous, difficult part of the climb followed this. And that was climbing pretty much a 60-degree angle. And that was to get over the top of Outpost Camp. We went the most ridiculous route we could have, and we were just following these guys, and they ended up going the wrong direction. We could have walked around to the right and had a nice, easy stroll that would have taken twice the amount of time. Wouldn't have required us to literally go a near vertical face of snow and ice. But we did it and got that. And at this point, Luke is starting to look even worse. And we get to this section where it's basically 20-foot walls, 20 or 30-foot walls of just snow and ice vertical. There is no other way around at this point because we already made the mistake. It was going, we had to go up those. I'm feeling like 110% right now. I feel like I'm on like some type of just like drug. Like I am like flying through this. I've never felt better in my life. And I ran up the first 20 feet. And I'm standing there, and Luke has barely even started. About 15 minutes later, he makes it up the first 20 feet. It was literally going a foot. And I sit there, and I'm like, okay, and he gets close to me, so I make it up the next 20 feet, just making sure I'm close to him. And I get up and stand on top, and are already like pretty far away. They've gone up the second one, and they're like continually walking. And I'm sitting there wondering, like, what are we going to do if we lose them? Because they've already taken us down this crazy route. I don't know how we're going to get back. Terrible time. And at this point, he needs to make it up this, because to backtrack, there would be better ways to backtrack, but it would be very difficult in his position to climb back down. And I think I was about 15 to 30 minutes longer up, and was, I mean, the worst shape I've ever seen him in. Worst shape I think I've ever actually. And he basically laid down by this rock, and more or less said, okay, that's it, we're going down. like that. We've had enough. We're going down. He's like, we're going to sit here and rest a bit. And I'm like, well, drink some water, eat some food. Maybe that'll help you. And then, we'll make our final decision right then and there. Well, he drank and ate a bunch of food, and 30 minutes later was actually feeling much better. To continue against our, I guess, better judgment, but less than a quarter mile later, he was 100% better. It was the weirdest thing ever. I don't know if it was because he slowed his pace to pretty much nothing and actually had some time to acclimate, or maybe it wasn't. Maybe it was something he ate. I have a hard time believing that, but a quarter of a mile later, he was pretty much 100% better. And now, at a quarter of a mile later, I'll give you a little bit of update here. I guess before I do that, I'll say where we were at when we were sitting there and he was sick. So this was at 4:25 a.m., 1,800 feet elevation. This is when Luke is sitting down, drinking and eating and not feeling well.
What type of food did you guys bring? Was it like Cliff Bars, or did you have like freeze-dried food with water and stuff?
It was tons of water. We had 3 liters of water we were carrying, and we also had a water filtration system to where we could filter any sort of water that we came across. And then as far as food goes, we had a crap ton of Cliff Bars because they're high in calorie count. Trail mix, it's high in calorie count. And then we had these like gummy worm things that Cliff makes that each one has a specific purpose. Like some of them have a real high caffeine boost in them. Some of them have like a sodium kicker if you need that and stuff like that. So
that's pretty cool.
That was our main source.
Okay.
And, so it's 4:25 a.m. We're at 11,800 feet, sitting next to this rock. Luke's pretty much having the worst time ever. But we turn around. We're sitting on this, basically in this perfect view of like a V shape down this valley. And the sun is actually rising at 4:25 a.m. It's rising over probably a 10,000 foot range of mountains way in the distance. So everyone's pre-dawn that normally people would just start seeing it sort of lighten up outside, the full sunrise, because we're so, high up this mountain. That moment right there, every single amount of money I spent to get on top of that mountain, it was worth every single heartache getting up that mountain. It was worth missing the Maker's Fair. It was worth single thing that I had to do to get up that mountain. That moment right there was worth it. I can't explain to you how amazing the view was. I have it on GoPro, but GoPro blew the sky out and made the ground light and totally lost the color of it. But reflecting off all the snow and all these giant mountains surrounding us, and in that moment it was like, I want to do this for the rest of my life. Like, thing I've ever seen in my entire life. Luke and I have dreamed of climbing a mountain our entire life. Never had the opportunity, never been in a situation where we could have tried it, never traveled anywhere that really had any mountains. But since we were 6 years old, we have said that we were going to climb Mount Everest by the time we were 23. But it was sort of like this surreal moment for both of us right there on that mountain that was like, everything we've worked for was worth it here. We could turn back right now, down this mountain, and be fully satisfied right here. And I think that gave him a lot of motivation and a lot of a boost, and maybe that's really what helped him feel better. That a quarter mile later, fully better. And then from around 4:25 all the way to 7 a.m., we walked in a valley of snow. Pretty easy walking, basically just sort of like a slight uphill angle. It was not bad. We were both feeling really good at this time. And we made it all the way to the trail camp, which is at 12,000 feet.
So Dylan, knowing what you know now, sorry to cut you off real quick. Would you suggest to anyone that wants to do the same type of thing? Do you suggest doing this spontaneously like that to people? Just saying, just do it? Or do you suggest, taking a step back, looking at it and being like, well, should we wait it out? Should we actually? Because right, from what you're saying is it's all about just doing it right now. And what you've said so far looks like it's turned out pretty well.
Yeah, I mean, most definitely. It depends on what the situation is, and I don't mean it depends on what the situation is, whether you should do it or not, but it depends on how you should look at it. Because if this was an opportunity to change jobs and move cities, there's a lot of fear in that, danger in that. Doing something like we were doing requires less planning, less actual doing as moving across the country, but it involved a tremendous amount of danger. Up until this point, we've looked death straight in the eyes probably 3 or 4 times. We could have made, and I'm not exaggerating when I say this, we could have slipped and made one single mistake and could have died. We would have been severely injured, and it would have been nearly impossible for us to get off that mountain, which could have, in result, ended up one of us dying. So you do need to evaluate yourself as a person whenever you evaluate risk. You need to know what your limits are, and you need to set what that line is, because there's a very, very thin line between risk and recklessness. I think Casey Neistat said that. Very, very, very thin line between that. And knowing where that is and knowing when to stop is very important. For a lot of people, just camping out alone behind a rock in bear territory would make them have an anxiety attack. There's other people that as soon as they hit that traversing moment, they would have turned back. And I'm not saying we're some big macho men that we think we can do this and that we're better for that. But what I mean by that is better than anybody else. So whenever you look at something like this as an opportunity or as a risk or a possibility of doing, you should take it, because we sort of have the mentality of we can do anything we set our minds to, and for the most part, as long as we put in all the effort possible, we've been able to achieve. And it's all about having an extremely strong mind. Like this mountain in the summertime, it's fit, and I don't want to take away from anyone doing this because we plan on going back and doing it during the summer. But pretty much anyone who's fit and can handle some light stresses and some really hard work can climb this mountain. Whenever you climb it with snow, I guess too in the summer, but especially whenever you climb it in the snow or you do anything remotely like this, it requires an extremely focused and strong mind. And I don't mean an extremely strong mind in the sense of you could do a math equation when you're up there. Your limits and being able to focus in really sketchy situations that are high risk and not having any freakouts. For whatever reason, God has gifted both Luke and I that ability, and we're able to stay calm in pretty much any situation. And that's sort of the reason why we've ran together for so many years, because we just love doing crazy stuff. But that is something that you need to take into consideration, I guess, is that, we have a lot of friends that do amazing things, but if they were put into a situation like this, knowing them, there would have been a lot of anxiety that would have happened. And anxiety when you're 12,000 feet in the air and relying on the other person the entire time is not a good thing. To be like serious as I'll get out, it's not a good thing. And if you think that doing something like this particular thing, if you think that you might have anxiety problems, I would take a step back. for sure. But everyday life, what most people take as opportunities don't generally have like danger. There's risk and danger are completely separate. Risk, danger, and recklessness, right? So risk is, in my mind, mostly like maybe like a financial stress, or someone not liking you anymore, or you having to cut back on what you consume, or things like that. Things that put you in bodily harm, or things that you're getting yourself. Maybe you want to move to like a third world country and help out with people. You're going to have some danger involved with that versus moving to California where you're going to have risk. You know what I mean? Like, you're going to have risk that rent's going to be really high and that you can't afford it. Versus moving to a third world country, you risk, I hope that makes sense. Does that answer the question? I don't want to go too far into a rabbit hole.
That answered it perfectly. Thank you. Your mic's crackling a little bit. I don't know if it's your connection, but no, that was perfect. Thank you.
Oh, all right.
You're welcome to continue. Sorry that I cut you off. I think you said when it was 5. Did you say 4:35 a.m. now?
It's 7 a.m.
Yeah,
Okay.
Dylan.
7 a.m. We're 12,000 feet.
If you want to reconnect your mic or whatever it is you need to do, we'll edit this out in the podcast. I think it's good if we get that resolved.
Yeah.
So, there's crackle in the
second.
audio, basically.
Okay.
1 second.
Yeah, that's pretty awesome. And the 2 cents I can add to this is I just had a colleague at work that went to climb Everest, and it's scary. That stuff scares me personally. Sounds like a very adventurous trip. I don't know how I would how I would react in that situation.
Yeah, I totally agree. I don't really know what I would do. It's so I stay calm with certain things, but when I get up high, I start to get really anxious. It's not even high, okay. I'll stay calm. Like if someone cut their finger off or something in wood shop, I'm very, very like calm and to the point. Like this is what we need to do. This is what we need to get done. But I'll get certain bouts of anxiety, and like Dylan, like what you're talking about, how when you and Luke were on the map and you couldn't really find anyone, and then finally you saw someone with like it wasn't really showing up where you guys were on the map where you're supposed to be. My anxiety would have slowly started to kick in, and my rational thoughts probably would have been pushed a little bit farther back, and my unrational thoughts would have come forward a little bit. I give you huge props for doing that. I personally would not be able to do that, especially like what you guys just did on a whim. Like, yeah, let's do it. That's so cool to be able to say.
Yeah. Major props.
Yeah. We can edit this like awkward part out.
Yeah, we will.
Yeah, at one point you're gonna need to edit the front part too because it logged me out halfway through. Right, you're just about to say, so just what about you? And then my internet went out, so I was off of this. So I quickly went back on, and right when I loaded back on, you're like, so Justin, what have you been up to? And I'm like, but you can just hear all the clicking and like me just mumbling myself, all pissed off. So you might need to edit that part in the audio.
I actually didn't notice an issue there, but that's okay. But yeah, anyway, this is still streaming live, so if you're watching on YouTube,
please excuse the technical difficulties.
This is the behind the scenes stuff that goes on.
Actually,
exciting.
He'll be back in a minute.
Yeah.
All right, can you hear me?
Yes. Yeah,
Okay.
it's all good now.
right.
How far along are we in the story? Just out of curiosity, because we are kind of also 50 minutes in, maybe.
This might have to run long because I'm only halfway through the story.
That's fine.
Justin, how are you on time?
Oh no, because we started earlier, that works perfectly. So,
Okay.
We're Gucci. Thank you.
Okay. Well,
That's crazy that your coworker is climbing Everest.
Yeah. We
Major.
went as a group. He went for 2.5 weeks earlier in the month. So he got back. I don't believe they made it all the way to the top. I need to. Well, they didn't make it all the way to the top, but still,
That's most. I mean, failure rate is like a little over 70% or something like that. 70% of people never make it, and there's I think there's only like 1,500 people or slightly more a year that actually try it. So just being up there is insane, I'm sure. But I think base camp is higher than Mount Whitney on Everest. But yeah, so 12,000 feet trail camp. At this point, we're basically sitting right below the summit. I mean, not right below, but we can actually see it for once. It's up to our right. Sitting on this little outcropping, taking a break. We've just done 3.1 miles and everything. And we're looking up at what is the most difficult section of the climb. This is what kills. This is what makes people turn back the most on this hike up Mount Whitney, both in the summer and in the winter. This is the last single push, mostly to the summit before it's a easy climb. This is what is referred to as the 99 switchbacks, and a switchback is where you walk up at an angle and then you turn back and walk across. Instead of going straight up a mountain, you just do a whole bunch of zigzags. 99 of those in the summertime, and it's a very, very, very strenuous climb that takes a toll on a lot of people, and that's where most people turn around. In the wintertime, that's completely covered in snow and it's inaccessible. And the only way to get up is to go up what is a drainage chute. It's a massive slab of granite. It's covered in snow, and it's basically a 60 or 70 degree angle, long sheet of snow. You're going to basically climb vertical staircase in snow for a mile. It's by far the most daunting part of the entire climb. And so I think we're about a mile, the actual chute is what it's called, before we actually try to make that, before we get there. So we set out and walking, and literally the moment I stand up, I felt a little sick. I was like, that's weird. I felt my entire life, and now I feel a little bit groggy. Well, over that next mile, which 2 hours, by the way, which is insane. It took me 2 hours. I became very sick, very, very. A little over 12,000 feet is at the bottom of the chute. I think it's 12,000. Oh yeah, 12,750 feet at the bottom of the chute. And I've never felt so sick in my life. I have this, and it's increasingly gotten worse. I have this terrible migraine headache. I'm really, really dizzy. Like if I stand up too straight, too fast, it kind of like the world kind of like shifts a little bit weird. I was having like a really hard time myself that I had altitude sickness at that point. I thought that it was just sleep deprivation because I hadn't slept in like 30 hours, sleep the entire day before, and we didn't sleep the night we left either. And so I just sort of convinced myself that that's what it was. over, let's see, the next hour and a half. Wait, let me get this right. The next hour and a half, it takes me an hour and a half to go half a mile up the chute. Vertical climbing, but it takes me a half a mile to get up it. Luke is about halfway waiting on me, basically. And like I said, this is sort of the last push until climbing, at least what I've heard. I never made it that high. But at the top of the chute is called Trail Crest. And from Trail Crest, you have exactly 1.9 miles to the summit. And this is mostly ridgeline hiking, meaning that you're going to be really exposed in very dangerous places. It's the most dangerous part of the climb, but easy. You're just sort of walking along edges. And so I'm going up about halfway. What happened is I take maybe 15 steps. I don't even know that I could muster up 15 steps. I would stop and I'd count these. It was between 10 and 15 steps. And I had my trekking poles out. And I'd plant my trekking poles in front of me and I'd lay my head down on them. And what would happen is, like, my heart would be pounding out of my chest. I could feel it moving my jacket. Bad thing. Never had that feeling in my life. I was literally gasping for air, it felt like. But I would only wait 30 seconds. My heart rate would go all the way back down, and I would be able to breathe good again. And right as I was able to breathe good again, every single time, off. And I would do that sort of like head bob thing where you go like almost into a sleep and then your head picks back up. And I did this 5 times up that high, where I would stop and I'd doze off, my head would bob, and everything around me would be white. All I could see in front of me was white. And I'd have no idea where I was at. I've said this 15 times. I'm not exaggerating when I'm telling the story. I'm probably under-exaggerating on purpose, but I had no idea where I was for a very split second. I almost felt like the dream, and I woke up and realized that it wasn't, and that I was actually up this mountain. And where we're at on the chute, like I said, is a very, very steep slope. And if you don't have your ice axe out here, you would slide endlessly pretty much. And if you were lucky, you wouldn't hit any rocks. If you weren't, and as soon as the first time I almost fell off my feet happened, I looked up at Luke, who's about halfway, and I looked at him and I just gave him a thumbs down. And I was like, that's it. I can't do this anymore. Whereas I'm as far as I want to go. This is getting way, way too sketchy. This is past my point of, okay, I need to get down the mountain. The only way to cure altitude sickness is to either A, sit there and gain more red blood cells, which is not an option at this altitude, or B, get the hell down the mountain really fast. And I sort of trudged up to Luke and sat down next to him. And we're sort of sitting there, and I'm telling him what I'm going through, and we're kind of want to do. Do we want to sit there and wait and try to wait it out like we did for him and see if I feel better? But the problem was that we had lost so much time earlier that we really didn't have any time to give up. We had a very specific set time of 12 p.m. to be on the summit. If we were not up on the summit by 12 p.m., we would return no. And the reason for that is because as the day progresses, the snow starts to melt. In the chute, it's a very avalanche-prone area. It is also becomes very slushy and slippery, and is not a place that you want to slip and slide unexpectedly. And so we're sitting there and we're like, even if I was to feel better, we're not going to have enough time to get up there before our end date. And we, for a split second, we're like, okay, well, we'll extend it. We'll go till 2 o'clock. We'll make our end time 2 o'clock. But that was crossing the line from risk to recklessness right there in that moment. Extending that time to 2 p.m., we went past a predetermined time period that we had set when we were in a perfectly sane state of mind. Up there, sickness, your brain doesn't work the same. You have summit fever. It's right there. I mean, literally, it looked like we could have just rock climbed a little bit and been on the summit. In reality, it was 3 miles away. And thank God we said, no, we're coming down. Wait, we're not going to push it. We're going to come down right now. This is where this is about to get real. Up this mountain at that 12,000 mark, the whole time that I'm feeling terrible, up to the chute, I'm hiking next to a climber, 2 climbers. There were a couple. And we had passed them, basically immediately passed them. Even when I was sick, we passed them pretty quickly. And Luke was running really far ahead, and I was sort of back behind. And that the man and this couple wasn't doing well. He seemed to have signs of altitude sickness. He was asking questions about altitude sickness, which led me to believe that he really had it. And all of a sudden, he just collapsed on his hands and knees. And this is rewinding, but I didn't want to say it then because it would confuse you. But he collapses and falls on the ground, and I'm probably 30 or 40 feet away from him, and that takes me a very long time at this point to get to him. And I had to stop twice before I got to him. And I got to him, and he's just laying there staring up. He was perfectly fine, or acted like he was, but I knew then and there that he had altitude sickness pretty bad. I start talking to him, and I tell him that he needs to turn around, that he's got altitude sickness, and that continuing is really dangerous, and that the only way to cure this is to go back down. And he said that he wasn't going to, that he felt fine, that nothing was wrong, he was just a little tired, and there was nothing I could do, he was going to continue. His wife did not speak English, and he spoke fairly well English. Continued. And like I said, we walked past, and now I'm halfway up again, and we've made the decision to come down. We will stay down this slope, which means that you sit on your butt, and you basically slide down, and you take your ice axe, and you dig it in the ground behind you. And that sort of controls your speed and can stop you too. It's much easier than walking down a really steep slope. We're kind of coming down, and they're still coming up. And it takes her 30 minutes to go maybe 30 feet. They were both in trouble. They both weren't up for this, and they both were in sort of sickly needs. And her now turned out too.
You're Dylan.
She didn't even have an ice.
Cutting you off again. This is, I feel like, one of the best parts of the story that people should hear. Your mic is like totally like eating away at what you're saying right now. Is there any way? I mean, I don't want to keep cutting you off, but this is like the key part of the story that I feel like people should really hear because it's one of the deep parts. Are you able to like try and fix the audio again?
Yeah, let me do a full reset here.
Okay, sorry about that. Yeah, I didn't want to keep like I didn't want to butt in and cut him off. I felt bad.
Yeah, me too. I was trying to find an opportunity to jump in. I was just about to jump in at the same time, but I wonder why that's happening. We've never had that issue before.
My only guess is it's the USB cable he's using because the Yetis use USB.
Yeah, maybe.
Maybe it's the connection on the Yeti. I don't know. So how's it going?
Good. I feel like, I mean, this does not compare to anything like climbing the mountain, but I feel really like anxious right now just listening to the story.
Same. I agree. Oh yeah, you haven't heard the other half of it. Just wait. It gets better.
Yeah.
I already read his whole bio thing he wrote on Facebook, which was really cool. He did a very good job summing it up too. Yeah, we're making fairly good time. I mean, usually we start at 5:30 right now, and it's only 5:38, so that's not too bad.
Yeah. Worst case, we'll pass the after show.
Oh yeah.
When do you have to leave by?
I gotta be at a family. We're gonna have like a family dinner because my sister's back. So like by 8. So just before, a little bit before, like 7:40. Because usually when we start at 5, we usually end at around 7:40ish. So I just wanted to give us a little bit of time to like wiggle room.
Okay.
Good.
Bueno.
Yeah, that's good.
Continue.
All right. When did it start cracking up?
5 minutes ago.
No, yeah, I mean it was a decent amount of time ago, but no. Start right when you're saying about you're scaling back down the mountain.
Yeah. So we're coming back down the mountain. I can tell now that the woman is also not doing that well either. It's taking her a really long time to move. She seems to be becoming way more fearful. She's not prepared. She doesn't have an ice axe. So if she were to fall, it would be very difficult to stop. And I stop by the guy and I tell him, I look him straight in the face. And I've obviously never had to tell someone this in my entire life. And it was a very scary moment. It was one of the realest, scariest moments of my life, looking at him, because I felt terrible. I could tell he felt terrible. And I could tell that they were as or worse off than we were, and even probably less prepared or had less of a skill set than we did, or weren't as physically fit or moving much slower. And I stopped and I told him, I said, look, she doesn't have an ice axe. If she falls, it's going to be very difficult for her to stop. You're getting to a point now where the ice around here is going to start melting. If you get on that ridge line up there and it's slushy, it's going to become way more dangerous. And if you continue with this altitude sickness, and if you don't stop, you could pass out, and there's no way she's getting you down this mountain. You're the last people on the mountain. There's nobody up at this altitude. Y'all are the last people. You will die. I looked at him, and I remember his face very vividly. I said, you will die if you do not stop. You will die. And he was very, very frightful. And I'm not even sure that he was thinking in his right mind at the moment to say anything. He sort of gave me the intention of, I'm not going to stop. But he seriously questioned it in that moment. And we continued. There's nothing we could have done. I think I did probably more than I really, probably even crossed the line that I probably shouldn't have, or probably wouldn't normally do with someone. And I got extremely serious with him. As y'all know, I'm very outspoken, and I told him what I really thought, that, if you continue right now, there is a good chance that you're not going to make it back down this mountain. Well, we go stay down the bottom, and we're sitting there, and we kind of take a break because I'm actually feeling better. I'm all the way back down at trail camp, and I'm starting to actually feel better, surprisingly. I'm not having like as much dizziness, We're just sort of standing there, and we hear this really loud, like echoed like throughout the whole thing, and we're like looking around like, what in the world was that? And a giant rock had fallen off a face up to our left. This is right below where they were standing. Falls down, hits the snow, and rolls probably like a mile. And it's hard to tell and judge distance and size out there. Something that you may think is like right around the corner could be 3 miles away, especially when it's all snow. It's just hard to tell. And there's no trees up there to gauge anything by. The tree line stopped well before that. If I had to guess, this rock that fell off this face was probably the size of like a small car, like a Fiat or something. And when it hit the snow, it created a snowball probably the size of a beach ball. And that snowball just kept like growing and getting like larger, and it was swerving down the mountain. And I looked at Luke and I said, Luke, that's coming at us. That's coming right at us. And it literally came within probably 100 feet of us. And just as fast as you saw it, it was gone. And those are the risks that you start having when you climb later in the day. I've learned a tremendous amount. I went into this trip not knowing anything. I've come out of it still not being very experienced, but I've gained a tremendous amount of knowledge through the research and through talking and through kind of sort of experiencing it now. But that is one of the number one things that I realized, that decision we made right then was one of the best decisions I've ever made. As we're walking down, literally you would just sort of hear creaking, crunching noises, and this is just stuff literally falling off the mountain. That's avalanche prone. You know, if you have a car-sized rock falling in the snow, that's the easiest way to make an avalanche. And so that was a very scary moment, and really made me think in the back of my mind, like, what are these people doing? We're now 3 miles away from them, and we can still see them standing in the same place we left them. They've barely made any progress. And we continue down the mountain. There's not much left to tell you about going down the mountain. It went down the same way we came up. Got lost a little bit, but wasn't hard to find our way because it was daylight. Glaciated a whole bunch, and we had a big ball. It was a lot of fun coming down. We got down, Molly picked us up. We went back to the hotel and pretty much slept for 12 hours straight, ate a ton of food. At that point, we had done 30 some odd miles in the snow uphill, not sleeping for like 36 hours. So we were, obviously pretty much spent. The next day, we met up in San Francisco with Justin and hung out with Laura. We hopped on a plane that night. We went home. We got back to the airport at home at 11 the following day, and I had this terrible feeling. I remember specifically the first time I had cell phone service, and I called my dad to tell him that we made it down the mountain. One of the very first things I said was, I think somebody's going to die up there tonight. I said there was a couple up there that didn't turn back. And that was one of the first things I said to my dad. Well, I pretty much passed out immediately after I got down and didn't really think anything else about it until we had gotten back. And I'm sitting there, we're eating food right outside the airport, and I just got this terrible feeling, and I just instinctively just searched missing hiker Mount Whitney. And sure enough, there was a missing hikers report for the lady that I had seen that day that was on the mountain, that I had just seen, missing hikers report. And I just had this worst feeling ever. I had a feeling of, what could I have done better? What else could I have done? Could I have made them come down? I don't think there was. But for a long time that day, I felt horrible. I felt like something had ripped the heart out of my body. And they hadn't found her yet, which meant that she spent 2 nights out there on that mountain, and they still hadn't found her. And this was on a random Facebook page, like the 10th search result inside of a form that I found this. Like, I dug really deep. I didn't just do some surface search of missing climber. I found it really shook me. It was not something that was publicly like spoken of that much. And I found out the ranger's number. It was on the little description. And I called up there and I said I may have been one of the last persons to see them. And I sort of gave what happened. And I said, coming down was really easy up until this certain particular point, which was outpost camp. And I said that was the sketchy part that day of coming down. Maybe search there. They had been searching nonstop with helicopters all day. Well, about 4 hours later from that phone call, I went back on, and I'd been literally refreshing the sheriff's Facebook page like all day long. And there was another update, and they had found her. She had died. So, yeah, it was. I don't even know how to explain it. I mean, I felt I felt just as bad as you possibly could, because I think I was literally probably the last person to see them. And I'm not even going to go into details as to what happened, because there was decisions that were made up there even past the point when we left that caused this accident. Things that probably neither one of them were in the right mind, but they ended up separating ways, and she went down on her own, and she fell at outpost camp 60 feet down the 2 vertical faces, I believe, that we climbed. I'm not 100% on this, but I'm pretty sure it's the 2 vertical things that we climbed that I told you about when Luke was so sick. She fell either to her death there, or she fell and then no one found her for another 2 nights. This was quite the wake-up call. I don't really know what I felt. It was sort of, I don't know, sort of, I guess, a little bit of guilt, but more of just like almost anger at like, why would you not just calm down and all this sort of things. But it goes to show you that if you cross that line that I was talking about, which is hard to see, the line's very hard to see, but if you cross that line from risk to reckless, bad things can really happen. That mountain, and I'm saying this particularly to say that that mountain is one of the most underestimated mountains in all of the world. It's one of the most climbed mountains also in the world. I think over 150,000 people a year attempt to climb it. I think only 7,000 maybe of those, these were old, outdated numbers, but I believe they said 7,000 of those people will actually make it to the summit. People come to this mountain really unprepared, not understanding what the difficulties are, just like us. And there wasn't a lot of information out there saying it. It was weird. Everything that we had seen, and I think probably everything that everyone else has seen, was a cakewalk. You really need to be in shape. But other than that, you go straight up and you're good to go. And it's not the case. It's not the case at all. There's an extreme amount of danger involved with it, and it's not something to be taken lightly. And yeah, I don't even know where to go with this, but a very, very, very tragic situation that I wish was avoided. It's just terrible. She was 27 years old and doing something that was on her bucket list, apparently, of things that she wanted to do in her lifetime. She's doing one of those, amazing things, and tragedy. So, that is the Mount Whitney story, the full, unedited, uncut, real version that changed my life. No joke. That tragedy, I don't know. It's weird. I'm over it now. I feel much better about it. I've come to terms with I did every single thing that I possibly could have done, probably more than what most people were willing to say to anyone. And I did my part, but that still happened. I don't know. The trip changed me in many different ways, and I don't even know how to express it. But it's one of those things where, you have to look at, I don't know. I don't know where I'm going with this, but this opportunity didn't turn out the way I thought it would. But it gave me this sort of wake-up call in my life of finding that risk to recklessness line. I really found it on this trip. And to be honest, I've never found it my whole life. I've been doing really reckless things my whole life, putting myself in danger. And it was a real wake-up call. But life-changing at the same time, because I have this new, really driven passion of exploration. I've lost it in the last 3 or 4 years after doing this YouTube thing and not having time and not making time to go and do big major things that as in my childhood were dreams. I don't know. We're going back. I'll put it that way. We're going back to Whitney. I'm already planning a trip to be back. We're going to go and summit it. We're going to do the highest peak on the East Coast here in probably the next 2 months. It's called Mount Mitchell. It's in North Carolina. We'll be doing that one. And I've found this sort of I don't know, I've never been more zen or focused in on anything in my entire life. It's the one thing that is posted this on Instagram. It's the one thing that's ever fully taking me away from work. It's the one thing that's ever been able to fully captivate my attention and me thinking nothing else but what was going on in the moment. It was this really weird sensation that I need to find again. Ever since I've gotten back, Molly will tell you, I've just been researching like crazy on everything that you just need to know, and local hikes and going to other places and going, because I want to find what I found on that mountain again. It sounds sort of dumb and philosophical, but it's not. I literally this sounds dumb, but I literally found sort of myself or my full body up there. It was a life-changing trip that I will never, ever in a million years forget.
Well, I want to say I'm glad you're okay and that you made the right call on when you when
Yeah, I
it was
agree
too
with that.
much.
When enough's enough to come down. Yeah.
Yeah.
It is
I
that
figured
is
this
a
would be a
really
very awkward moment at the end.
no, I was gonna say no,
It's
it's a really deep story. It is. It's hard, especially because it just
Yeah.
happened. And right, it's kind of
Yeah.
surreal. You always hear about these stuff on the news and you're like, oh, that's terrible. And then speaking for you, right, then you actually get put in that position where it happened. And it happened to someone who you've met or know of. So that's
never
surreal.
think that stuff's you're right. You never think that stuff's going to really happen. And I've always been that way, and it was just a major wake-up call. I think maybe I needed it. Maybe it was just happenstance that it just occurred when I was there. But I sort of believe that, not in an extreme sense, but I sort of think that everything kind of happens for a reason. In that, and you can sort of kind of dictate that a little bit, as far as what the decisions you make and stuff like that. But I do think that things happen for a reason. And this trip is a prime example because we went there. This is the first major trip that I've done with Luke really ever. And we got to do something that we've been dreaming of for our whole lives in a spectacular way. And the amount of things that had to work out for us to actually be able to do it were most people would stop at the first sign of this isn't going to work and then just completely forget about the idea. I mean, we had to get a permit that people literally wait years for in order to get it. The day that we were actually there was the day that Mount Whitney campground opened up. The first day of the year. Just happened to be the day that we got a permit. So this is the actual, if it's not open, then you have to do this whole workaround to get up there. And then on top of that, we go to the REI store, and everything in the whole store is 25% off for some like ridiculous anniversary sale that they never have. So we were able to get like good deals on stuff. And we met someone who was more or less our age there who had done it multiple times and had given us all this advice on what to do and how to do it. And then when we were lost, someone came and found us at 2 a.m. in the morning. We met up with these people. There was a lot of stuff that happened that just sort of got us to where we were. And it was weird. I mean, I'm not gonna lie, we had to spend a ridiculous amount of money. We spent as much money climbing that mountain as we did on the rest of the trip. We had to cancel 2 Airbnbs, both of which were quite expensive, and didn't get anything back from them other than like a cleaning fee. And we had to get 3 more nights of hotels, 3 or 4 more nights of hotels. We had to drive through the night on multiple occasions. I mean, it was a tremendous amount of work to get to climbing that mountain. But do I regret it at all? Not even for a second. Not even for knowing what kind of impact that made on me now. I'll never pass up an opportunity like it again in my life, ever. Having that happen to me was, I can't explain it. I cannot explain the sort of sensation and feeling I got up there. And it's not for everybody. I mean, not everyone's going to find themselves on a mountain. That sort of just correlates and goes into everyday life of like opportunities you may have. You may find yourself in taking on a new job opportunity or something like that. But I guess me in general, just getting down to the full roots of myself is I'm just extremely adventurous. And I've never had, I hate to say I never had an opportunity because it sounds like it's never been handed to me, but I've never lived in an area where there was a lot to do as far as adventure goes. and I never really been around it that much, but I've known my whole life that I enjoy it. And being out in California, I want to move immediately. And in the after show of this, which is exclusively available for Patreons, hashtag plug a little bit, I'm going to talk about an idea I have of how I'm going to be able to go to all these places and do all the things that I want to do in my life while still being able to do my passion, make money, and explore. And I'm to the point where I'm ready to do it. I'm ready to take like the full plunge of doing it. And so I'm going to discuss that in the after show of what sort of my idea behind that is. In fact, I went today. It involves moving wherever it is I need to move at any moment.
All right.
I actually went today to start some planning. Yeah. I guess with that, let's end this. I want to end it saying that I hope I didn't make anyone feel super down, but I wanted to be completely honest with the trip. I wanted to be fully outspoken. If the trip at all to you sounded like the climb at all to you isn't enjoyable or really difficult or scary, it was in a sense, but at the same time, it was the most spectacular, beautiful scenery I've ever seen in my entire life. Yes, anyone's capable of doing it. Get some proper training. Don't be foolish like we did. It's worth doing. I want to end it with that. It's definitely worth doing. Don't make it. I'm not trying to make this sound like a a horrifyingly terrible climb. In the summertime, very safe to do. Very hard to be able to do, though. The permits are like few and far between. Very doable. Really, I mean, as long as you're in half decent shape, you could do it during the summer. So I encourage it. I mean, the views were insane. So yeah, hope I didn't get you too down, but that's going to do it for this week. Oh, y'all end it because I'm about to pass out. I got to start talking.
Chris, where can we find you?
You can find me on Toolify.ca and Toolify on YouTube and social media.
And you can find me on YouTube at Justin Levine, or you can make that and all the social medias. Again, my name, Justin Levine. Dylan, where can we find you?
Woodbrew. Search Woodbrew anywhere. Instagram is on fire right now, so go check it out. Luke took some unbelievable pictures on our trip. Go check them out.
And we want to give a shout out to Devin, who is our top patron. So thank you very much for the support.
Thank you, Devin.
Appreciate it.
Absolutely.
Well, we're going to head on over to the after show. Like we said, if you're a Patreon, come on, jump on over. But until then, we'll see you guys in the next podcast.
Yeah, hopefully you enjoyed that. Slightly out of the norm,
yeah.
But
And I know
you
it's
know,
gonna be a little
one of
longer
those
still.
formative moments, I'd say, and it's really cool to hear that firsthand from you, Dylan.
Yeah.
Hopefully it inspires some people to try some things, take some risks, go after what they want to do.
Agreed.
That's all I have to add. All right.
We'll see you guys next time.